What nervous system controls breathing? Autonomic nervous system is in charge of...
When Mayim Bialik stepped into the role of guest host on Jeopardy, it carried more meaning than a television credit. For her, it represented continuity, responsibility, and respect for a show deeply embedded in cultural memory. Hosting was not a performance driven by ego, but an act of stewardship. Yet behind the public-facing calm of syndicated television, the entertainment industry operates under complex rules shaped by contracts, schedules, and power structures that are rarely visible to audiences. When circumstances shifted during a turbulent period for Hollywood, choices made quietly behind closed doors had lasting consequences. What followed was not a dramatic fall, but a moment that revealed how quickly roles can change when values, timing, and institutional priorities no longer align. Roots, shaped by history and culture. Mayim Bialik was born on December 12, 1975, in San Diego, California, into a family whose identity was deeply influenced by Jewish history and immigrant resilience. Her parents, Beverly and Barry, were shaped by generations who had arrived in America from parts of Eastern Europe, carrying little more than determination and cultural memory. Those roots were not abstract stories, but living values passed down through ritual, language, and tradition. Her home life emphasized education, community, and continuity, grounding her in a sense of belonging that extended beyond geography. Though her family later moved to Los Angeles, San Diego remained symbolic as the place where her personal story began, rooted in modest means and meaningful heritage. Early exposure to creativity. Creativity entered Mayim's life not through ambition, but through proximity. Her mother, a drama teacher, exposed her to theater environments where storytelling felt communal rather than glamorous. These early experiences were not auditions for fame, but introductions to expression. Acting was never framed as escape or status, it was simply one of many ways to engage with the world. When opportunities arose, they were approached with curiosity rather than expectation. That grounding would later help her navigate an industry often defined by pressure and performance, even as success arrived earlier than most children are prepared to manage. Childhood acting without illusion. Mayim Bialik's earliest steps into acting unfolded during a stage of life when identity is still tender and unfinished. She was not entering an industry with illusions of glamour, but a working environment that required discipline, adaptability, and emotional awareness far beyond her years. Film and television sets introduced her to adult rhythms, long hours, expectations, and professional boundaries, while she was still learning who she was outside of the roles she played. Opportunity came paired with complexity, and she absorbed both quietly. At home, however, structure remained unchanged. Schoolwork was non-negotiable, routines were protected, and curiosity was encouraged beyond cameras and scripts. Fame did not excuse responsibility, nor did it redefine her worth. Homework assignments mattered as much as auditions. Curfews were enforced with consistency. This steady grounding ensured that acting was something she did, not something she became entirely. That balance allowed her to participate in early success without being consumed by it, preserving a sense of self that extended well beyond the screen. Learning the weight of expectation. As her presence on screen grew more visible, so did the invisible pressures that accompany early recognition. Childhood acting requires flexibility without full agency, and Mayim became aware of how easily young performers can be shaped by opinions they did not ask for. Praise arrived quickly, but so did judgment, comparison, and expectation. On set, social dynamics were not always simple, and the unspoken hierarchy of adult spaces could feel disorienting. She learned that being noticed meant being interpreted, often without context. Rather than internalizing every reaction as truth, she was guided toward reflection and emotional processing. Therapy and open conversations became tools, not signs of weakness. Her family emphasized that feelings were valid, but they did not define her future. These early experiences taught her how to sit with uncertainty without shame, a skill that would later inform her openness about mental health. The lessons weren't dramatic, they were quiet and cumulative, shaping her ability to move forward without losing emotional awareness. Blossom and the arrival of recognition. When Blossom premiered, it connected instantly with audiences because it spoke honestly about adolescence, family, and self-discovery. The character resonated not because she was idealized, but because she felt real, intelligent, awkward, curious, and emotionally present. For Mayim, The role mirrored aspects of her own personality, making the performance feel less like transformation and more like amplification. Yet success arrived with speed, and with it came public exposure during a formative stage of life. Viewers embraced familiarity and warmth, while behind the scenes, responsibility expanded. The pace of production demanded consistency, professionalism, and emotional regulation. Gratitude existed alongside pressure. She understood that the role meant something to people, and that awareness carried weight. Being part of a cultural moment was meaningful, but it also required care. She was no longer just participating in a show, she was representing something larger than herself, a realization that shaped how seriously she approached her work. Fame, without escape. Teen stardom did not protect Mayim from uncertainty, it intensified it. Public attention created a contrast between external validation and internal questioning. Applause could be loud, but it did not answer personal doubts. She learned early that visibility does not guarantee stability, and recognition does not replace self-understanding. While others may have viewed success as security, her family maintained a different perspective. Education remained central. Curiosity remained encouraged. Acting was treated as meaningful work, but never as a sole measure of value. When Blossom came to an end, the transition felt less like a fall and more like a pause. The familiarity of routine disappeared, replaced by a decision point many young performers face, whether to chase the momentum of visibility or step into something unknown. For Mayim, the answer was not obvious, but it was intentional. She did not rush to replicate success. Instead, she considered what kind of life she wanted to build beyond the moment, choosing education over continuity. Rather than extending her acting career simply because it was available, Mayim chose a path that surprised many. She stepped away and enrolled at UCLA. The decision was not rooted in rejection of acting, but in genuine intellectual curiosity. She pursued neuroscience alongside Hebrew and Jewish studies, immersing herself fully in academic life without relying on past recognition. In classrooms and laboratories, her earlier fame carried little weight. She was evaluated on effort, understanding, and persistence, just like everyone else. The transition was challenging. Concepts were complex, expectations were high, and starting over meant confronting self-doubt without familiar reassurance. Yet that anonymity proved grounding. It offered space to explore ideas, ask questions, and exist without performance. Education became an anchor, reinforcing that identity could be built through learning as much as achievement. This chapter did not erase her acting past, it expanded her sense of possibility, laying the foundation for a life defined by depth rather than continuity alone. Science as identity, not an exception. For Mayim Bialik, science was never a detour from her life, it was a continuation of it. As she immersed herself in neuroscience, particularly the study of behavior and neurodevelopment, she found a rhythm very different from the entertainment world she had known so young. Research moved slowly. Answers were not immediate, and effort often went unnoticed. There was no applause for persistence, no audience for late nights spent reviewing data or questioning assumptions. Yet within that quiet discipline, she felt a profound sense of alignment. Science demanded humility, patience, and collaboration, reinforcing the idea that progress is rarely individual. It taught her to sit with uncertainty without rushing to resolution, to value process over praise. In laboratories and academic spaces, her identity expanded rather than narrowed. She was not an actress studying science. She was a student, a researcher, a thinker. That distinction mattered deeply. It affirmed that a person does not have to choose a single lane to be legitimate. That curiosity itself can be a stable foundation for identity. Returning to acting with intention. When Mayim eventually returned to acting, it was not driven by necessity or nostalgia, but by choice. She no longer needed the industry to validate her worth, which allowed her to engage with it more honestly. Her role as Amy Farrah Fowler on The Big Bang Theory felt less like a performance and more like a convergence of worlds. Amy was not a caricature of intelligence, but a reflection of real academic environments Mayim understood firsthand. Her scientific training informed subtle details, how curiosity presents itself, how social awkwardness can coexist with confidence, how intellect is often paired with vulnerability. Audiences responded to that authenticity because it felt lived in rather than exaggerated. As the character evolved, so did Mayim's presence within the ensemble. She was not returning to reclaim visibility. She was contributing something layered and grounded. Acting became meaningful again, not because it defined her, but because it complemented the person she had become. Advocacy, shaped by experience with stability, came a broader sense of responsibility. Mayim began using her platform to speak about fairness, representation, and respect within the entertainment industry, not as a spokesperson, but as someone who had lived its contradictions. Her advocacy was measured and thoughtful, rooted in experience rather than confrontation. When discussing issues such as pay equity or the portrayal of intelligence on screen, she emphasized dialogue over division. She understood that change is rarely sustained through outrage alone. It requires listening, persistence, and clarity. Her scientific background reinforced this approach: observe carefully, question assumptions, and remain open to evidence. Advocacy, for her, was not about visibility, but about contribution. She believed that longevity in any field depends not only on talent, but on integrity and the willingness to improve the systems one benefits from. Balancing public and private life. Outside of her professional work, Mayim approached personal life with the same intentionality she applied to science and storytelling. Parenthood, relationships, and lifestyle choices were navigated thoughtfully, guided by research, reflection, and personal values. Public attention often followed these decisions, sometimes accompanied by misunderstanding or oversimplification. Rather than retreating entirely, she chose to explain her perspectives with calm clarity, acknowledging that her choices were not universal prescriptions. She emphasized that different families, minds, and circumstances required different approaches. At the same time, she maintained boundaries, understanding that openness does not require full access. This balance, engaging without overexposing, allowed her to remain authentic without surrendering privacy. It reflected a maturity shaped by years of public life and private introspection. Writing as a space for integration. Writing became a bridge between Mayim's internal and external worlds. Through books and essays, she explored the intersection of science, personal experience, and cultural expectation. Her tone was reflective rather than directive. She did not position herself as an authority with answers, but as a participant in ongoing inquiry. By blending neuroscience with lived experience, she offered readers context instead of instruction. Topics like parenting, development, and emotional health were presented with nuance, acknowledging complexity rather than simplifying it. The response to her writing revealed a hunger for that kind of conversation, one that respects intelligence while honoring uncertainty. Writing allowed her to slow down, to connect ideas across disciplines, and to share insight without performance. It was not about persuasion, it was about presence. Mental health as an ongoing conversation. Mayim's openness about mental health emerged naturally from both her academic background and her personal journey. She spoke about the mind not as a mystery to be feared, but as a system worthy of understanding and care. Her approach avoided drama and avoided shame, emphasizing that seeking support is a practical, human response to complexity. By framing mental health as a conversation rather than a crisis, she helped normalize reflection and self-awareness. She acknowledged that knowledge alone does not eliminate struggle, but it can provide language and tools for navigating it. Her willingness to speak calmly about these topics contributed to a broader shift away from judgment and toward empathy, reinforcing that well-being is not a destination, but a practice. Stepping into a cultural institution. Hosting Jeopardy placed Mayim within a legacy far larger than any individual role she had held before. The position required respect for tradition, sensitivity to audience attachment, and adaptability during a period of industry change. Responses were mixed, reflecting the emotional weight people associate with long-standing institutions. Mayim approached the role thoughtfully, understanding that continuity matters deeply to viewers. Decisions made during this time were shaped by contractual structures and broader organizational realities, not personal shortcomings. She navigated the experience with professionalism, aware that public roles often carry narratives beyond one's control. The experience reinforced a lesson she had learned repeatedly, that participation in cultural spaces requires resilience, perspective, and the ability to separate identity from outcome. A life defined by integration. Mayim Bialik's journey resists simple categorization. She is not an actress who studied science, nor a scientist who happened to act. She is someone who allowed different parts of herself to coexist, informing and strengthening one another. Her life reflects integration rather than reinvention, a steady weaving of curiosity, creativity, discipline, and care. She has shown that identity does not need to be singular to be coherent. and that growth does not require abandoning earlier chapters. In choosing thoughtfulness over spectacle and depth over speed, she has built a life that values meaning as much as achievement. That perhaps is her quiet legacy: permission to be complex, to evolve without apology, and to remain human in every role she inhabits. Navigating industry change. Periods of labor, negotiation, and production disruption affected many professionals across entertainment. Choices made during these moments are rarely simple. Mayim's involvement reflected her values and understanding of collective action. When her hosting role concluded, it marked a transition rather than an ending. Careers evolve, and moments of pause often lead to redirection rather than decline. Redefining success. After visibility. After stepping back from hosting, Mayim focused on work that allowed autonomy and alignment with her values. Podcasting, writing, and speaking engagements offered platform for sustained dialogue without institutional constraints. These spaces allowed her to engage with audiences more directly, emphasizing curiosity and compassion over performance. Legacy beyond a single role. Mayim Bialik's career cannot be summarized by one moment or decision. It reflects a pattern of intentional choice, adaptability, and commitment to learning. From child actor to neuroscientist to television host, her path illustrates that identity is not fixed. Each chapter informed the next without erasing what came before. What her story represents. Ultimately, Mayim's story speaks less about controversy and more about agency. It highlights how individuals navigate systems that are larger than themselves while remaining rooted in personal values. Her journey underscores that success is not linear, and influence does not require permanence in a single role. A life built on curiosity and care. What remains consistent throughout Mayim Bialik's life is curiosity, about people, about science, about meaning. That curiosity has guided her choices more than ambition. In a culture that often rewards certainty, she has embraced inquiry. Her legacy is not defined by titles, but by contribution to conversation, to understanding, and to the idea that growth is allowed at every stage of life.